Welcome to On the Moneyline, a podcast by MMA Play 365. I'm Newsome and I'm here to break down UFC Vegas 44 after the 1 week break, which is headlined by a phenomenal bantamweight fight between Rob Font and Jose Aldo, and that's exactly where we start with the breakdowns. I don't think you can ignore the resurgence that Jose Aldo has been on. I think it's very similar to what we've seen of Glover Teixeira. The only difference is I don't think that Jose Aldo is going to be a UFC champion again. But I do think that he's in a very difficult fight here against Rob Font, because where Jose Aldo seems to have struggled in his career, or at least lately, there's two areas, and both of those areas just describe Rob Font really well. So firstly, Jose Aldo does have problems against really technical, volume, heavy-based boxers in MMA, and that's exactly how you describe Rob Font, who, in my opinion, is one of the best MMA boxers in the UFC and in the world. But the other thing that Jose Aldo's had problems with in the past, especially, like I say, in his last 3 fights where he's gone 5 rounds, Jose Aldo fades and he slows down really badly late in those fights. And subsequently, he was finished all 3 times in those last 3 fights that he's been scheduled to fight 5 rounds. Sure, twice against Max Holloway and once against Cheyanne, both really solid fighters. Rob Font, I don't believe, is on those levels of those fighters, but I do think Rob Font does have the style to just cause Aldo a lot of problems. Aldo's fell in love with his boxing, so I do think that this is going to be a boxing stand-up fight, and that's where I think Rob Font is just going to accumulate a ton of volume. The other thing as well with Rob Font and Jose Aldo is Jose Aldo seems to tire out late in these fights, not because he overworks, he works too hard and his gas tank just doesn't live up to that. The reason why Jose Aldo does have problems with his gas tank is when he's getting peppered with straight shots down the middle, when his opponent is just accumulating volume on him. And we saw in Rob Font's last fight, he went 5 rounds with Cody Garbrandt, landed over 170 strikes. So I'd imagine those numbers are going to be quite similar against Aldo. And the more he just peppers away at Aldo, the more tired he's going to get. And I just think that Aldo, when he comes into range, is just going to be met with a really sharp, clean, clinical boxer with good cardio, with good volume, and it's going to be a problem. So I'm picking Rob Font to win this fight. And in the next fight, the co-main event, this is the fight that I think everybody has circled for their fight to watch. The potential fight of the night, we've got Rafael Fiziev versus Brad Riddell. Rafael Fiziev is the striking coach at Tiger Muay Thai, a gym that people travel to from all over the world to improve their striking. So that tells you everything you need to know about Rafael Fiziev's striking. But on the flip side, we've got Brad Riddell, who is the striking coach of UFC featherweight champion Alexander Volkanovski. So again, that tells you everything you need to know about the striking of Brad Riddell, and it also tells you everything you need to know about how good this fight is going to be. I think if we see any wrestling, that's more likely going to be from Brad Riddell's side, but Fiziev does have good wrestling defense. He does have decent defensive jiu-jitsu. He can get back up to his feet. So I think if Riddell is shooting takedowns, he might be successful on a couple, but I don't think it's going to be enough for this fight to be won and lost in that wrestling or grappling department. I think the fight's going to be won and lost on the feet. And I just want to quickly address the elephant in the room, which is the gas tank of Rafael Fiziev. So Fiziev did tire in his last fight in the 3rd round against Bobby Green, and suddenly, a lot of people think that he's a gas job, and I don't believe that to be the case. I think that the work and the forward pressure, the aggression, the volume and the power that Fiziev throws behind everything throughout the first couple of rounds in his fights, it'd be inhuman for him for not to tire in late in the fights. He does that much good work early on in the fight that, he does naturally slow down. The thing that I think makes it worse, or look worse against Bobby Green, is the fact that Bobby Green is just a cardio machine. He doesn't slow down, he doesn't tire, he'll keep going at the same pace. And it's those visual effects. You've got one fighter that's so fresh and one fighter that's tired a bit, and it just makes the fighter that's tired a bit look like he's tired way more than what he is, because his opponent is so fresh. Fiziev still comes forward, he still strikes, he still gets in the face of his opponent even when he tires in those 3rd rounds, so he's still active to an extent. It's not as if he's completely done. So the cardio, I think, is a little over exaggerated of Fiziev. I do think he will slow down in this fight though, with it being a striking affair, but again, I just don't think that he's going to slow down enough where Riddell's just going to absolutely blow him out of the water. I think if Fiziev slows down, I think Riddell's going to slow down as well. The body shots from Fiziev, the combination boxing, I think is going to get to Riddell. I don't think Riddell's going to be very fresh in round 3 either. But actually what I've just mentioned in regards to the combination striking and the kicking, the body kicks, the lead switch kicks from Fiziev, I think are weapons that are going to absolutely cause Riddell problems. Riddell, for as good as a striker as he is, I'd like to see more combinations from him, but you don't. And I think when you're looking at Fiziev, who is going to be the fighter that's wanting to be the aggressor, that's moving forward, getting in the face and bursting forwards with these strong combinations, ripping to the body and head, along with the kicks as well, I definitely think Brad Riddell is going to have his work cut out for him here. I think Fiziev's going to put it on him with the combination striking. I think Fiziev's got a massive upside, a finishing upside early in this fight as well, just because I think he's going to land flush and hard to Brad Riddell early and often. If he doesn't finish Brad Riddell, I think he's going to be able to do enough work early in this fight to be able to see the fight out and win on the scorecards as well. So it's going to be a fun fight, it's going to be fireworks, but I do think we're going to see which fighter's the better striker in this fight, and I think that's Rafael Fiziev. So I'm picking Rafael Fiziev to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Clay Guida versus Leonardo Santos. I think this is a really difficult fight for Clay Guida, if I'm being honest. Leonardo Santos is not the most technical striker, but he's got power, he's got pop, he fires punches straight down the middle, he can hurt his opponents. We saw him knock Stevie Ray out cold. He can strike moving backwards, he can strike moving forwards, but where Leonardo Santos is really dangerous is on the mat, in the world of the jiu-jitsu. He's a legit BJJ black belt, and I think if he takes Clay Guida down, or if this fight hits the mat, if Clay Guida takes Leonardo Santos down, I think it'd be a bad move. But if this fight hits the mat, I think Santos is just going to go through Clay Guida like a hot knife through butter. He's probably going to be able to submit him. If he doesn't submit him, he'll be able to ride rounds out, finishing on top, winning the minutes in the rounds, and ultimately taking 2 out of the 3 rounds at least. I think Leonardo Santos is what I like to call got all bases covered here. I think Santos is going to be able to beat him on the feet, land some hard strikes. And if he doesn't take him out of there, I think that Santos is going to be able to take this fight down to the mat and get Clay Guida out on the mat. In the world of the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu realm, I'm picking Leonardo Santos to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Jimmy Crute versus Jamahal Hill, a fight between 2 prospects. I know a lot of people don't like prospect versus prospect, but I love it. I love to see which is the better prospect, the one that's going to climb up the division. And, you know, the prospect that loses, it's always great as well, because they can take a loss, they can learn from it, they can come back. And like I say, I think that both fighters have taken the losses and they're fighting each other at the right time. I think from a striking perspective, I do give a very slight edge to Jamahal Hill. I think the way Jamahal Hill strikes, his composure, how relaxed he is on the feet, he fights long, so he's got good distance management, and he'll fire strikes, kicks, punches straight down the middle. I do think that that type of striking and that style will give him a striking edge against Jimmy Crute. But listen, Jimmy Crute is a striking protege of Sam Greco. But where this fight really does give the edge to one side is in the world of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I talk about this a lot, but Jimmy Crute is a legitimate BJJ black belt under Jean-Jacques Mercado, and anybody that knows anything about the Mercado brothers knows that that is absolutely legit. And if Jamahal Hill gets taken down to the mat and Jimmy Crute's on top, I think that Jimmy Crute, again, is going to have a lot of success on top of Jamahal Hill. His submission game is solid, his positional game is solid, but the thing that I like most about Jimmy Crute, especially in this fight, is his wrestling is developing from fight to fight. And I say this a lot with these good BJJ players, they must be good wrestlers because they've got to get the fight to where they're strongest. So Jimmy Crute improving his wrestling, we saw against Anthony Smith in his last fight, even on one leg when he had his nerve damage, he was still able to blast double leg Anthony Smith, still able to take Smith down. And I think he's going to be able to take Jamahal Hill down in this fight too. If Jimmy Crute wants to test his striking against Hill, I think he will fall very, very slightly short, but it'll still be really competitive. But when Crute starts to go for the takedowns and gets this fight down to the mat, I think we're going to see where the real gap in skill is here. And for that reason, I do feel that Jimmy Crute will get this fight down to the mat. I think he will have a lot of success, and I'm picking Jimmy Crute to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Brendan Allen versus Chris Curtis. Chris Curtis obviously only fought a couple of weeks. He's right back in there, and I love that about a fighter, but I do feel that he's coming to a really difficult fight against Brendan Allen. And again, Brendan Allen, we talk about developments. I love the fact he's developed his striking in his last fight against Punahele Soriano. I think a lot of people thought that soon Punahele Soriano would blast him out of the water, but he didn't. And Brendan Allen looked calm, composed, relaxed. He looked more technical. And I've been saying this about Brendan Allen now for quite a few fights. I've noticed very small glimpses each time he's stepped inside the cage. His striking's looked slightly better. each time we see him. And like I say, at Sanford MMA, he's definitely doing good things and improving his striking. And I think he's now at a level where he's going to be competitive with Chris Curtis. Chris Curtis, predominantly a boxer inside the cage, and he's got power. But I think that Brendan Allen's technical striking is now on a level where he's going to be able to compete with guys like Chris Curtis, who are predominantly strikers. But then the plan B that Brendan Allen has is that wrestling and that topside grappling. That's where he's strongest. That's where his bread and butter is. If Brendan Allen gets on top of Chris Curtis, it's going to be a bad night for Chris Curtis. Chris Curtis has had problems defending takedowns over 15 minutes in previous fights, and I think he's going to have problems in this fight if Brendan Allen goes for takedowns. I think if Brendan Allen does get him down to the mat, I think Brendan Allen's going to be able to do good work on him, finish him via TKO, submit him, or just win minutes of the rounds, win the rounds and take at least 2 out of the 3 on the scorecard should it go there. I think that, again, from a bases covered perspective, Brendan Allen has all bases covered. I think he's going to be more than competitive striking, but I think that the wrestling, the grappling is going to give Brendan Allen a serious edge in this fight. A big gap in skill there. I'm picking Brendan Allen to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Maki Pitolo versus Dusko Todorovic. And this is a really interesting fight because Dusko Todorovic's striking defense is always going to be the topic of conversation when you're analysing him as a fighter. He doesn't defend strikes in the correct ways. Hands are low. He likes to lean back and evade, move backwards in straight lines, keeping his chin there to be hit. And, you know, he can evade the first strike or maybe the second strike. But when he comes against a combination puncher that'll throw hooks in combinations, 2, 3, 4 punches at a time whilst moving forwards and being aggressive, he's going to run into issues. And I think that's what happens in this fight because Pitolo, I'm still a little bit unsure of where his ceiling is. I'm not totally sold on him as a fighter, but I do think he's good enough to be competitive in these types of UFC fights. And I think Pitolo, again, you look at him as a fighter, he's a forward pressure, aggressive fighter. He's durable, so he can take the shots, and then he's throwing in combinations, good at countering as well. So I think that he's going to get Todorovic moving backwards and evading, you know, leaning backwards. And once Pitolo starts putting that second, third and fourth punch together, I think he's going to be able to catch Todorovic. And if he doesn't knock him down, I think he's going to be able to do good enough work to either win on the judges' scorecards or at least just be dropping or hurting Todorovic. And that's something that judges will love to see. From Dusko Todorovic's perspective, his game, he works well in the clinch. He works well once he's got takedowns with top control. But I don't think against Maki Pitolo that Todorovic is going to have success there. Maki Pitolo's looked good in the clinch exchanges, good with his underhooks, good at turning his opponent against the cage, and he's been working a lot at Extreme Couture as well. So anybody that knows anything about Extreme Couture knows how hard they wrestle there. Pitolo, you're seeing that in his developments. His wrestling's getting better, his clinch work's getting better. I think he's going to be able to nullify a lot of where Todorovic is strongest, and where Todorovic has real issues and concerns from my perspective is where Pitolo's good. So I'm picking Maki Pitolo to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Jake Matthews versus Jeremiah Wells. And again, this is another interesting fight because Jake Matthews, for me, is the better mixed martial artist. I think he's the more technical striker as well. But Jeremiah Wells has got that explosive bursts of aggression, that athleticism that's going to cause a lot of fighter problems. And the thing is, you can be as good and as technical as you like, but if you're a fighter that's going to get put on the back foot by the more explosive fighter, the fighting and striking in bursts, then you're going to be on the back foot and you're going to have problems really implementing your game plan. And the thing is with Jake Matthews, I do think he's regressed slightly. I don't like the pace that he likes to fight at. He likes everything to be slow and calm and composed, where he can just get his reads in and, you know, just work to a certain level of timing and just pour volume out there slowly and consistently. He's not going to get that against Wells here. I think Wells is going to come out the blocks hard, fast. I'm not sure that Wells knocks Matthews out. I think Matthews is durable, but if Wells is just putting it on Matthews, then he's likely going to take the first round. And if he comes out doing the same in the second round, then Matthews is going to be playing a game of catch-up, which with his style he doesn't really want to do. I do think Matthews is going to be better the longer this fight goes on, but I think Wells is going to do enough good early work to either get Matthews out of there or just really just take the rounds away from Matthews and make him play that game of catch-up. And I don't think Matthews is going to be able to take Wells out later. So if Matthews gets to a point where At the end of round 2, he's looking like he's going to need a finish to win the fight. I think it's not going to come. So I think Wells is the more likely fighter to win on a scorecard or on these scorecards in that sort of scenario. But from a finishing upside, I definitely think Wells has got more finishing upside in this fight. Whether he does it or not is a different question. But I think Wells has got enough in the way that he fights from a stylistic perspective to be able to beat someone like Jake Matthews and the styles that he has. So for that reason, I'm picking Jeremiah Wells to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Zhalgas Zhumagulov versus Manel Kape. And I think this is a difficult fight for Zhalgas Zhumagulov. I think Manel Kape, again, from an all bases covered, he has them all covered. I think Manel Kape is a dangerous striker. I think this fight is going to be won and lost on the feet as well. If any fighter's shooting takedowns, I actually wouldn't rule out a takedown from either side, to be honest, but I don't think either fighter's going to be able to shoot a takedown and get a ton of top control time. I think their opponents are good enough to be able to get back up to the feet and have the fight play out on the feet. And that's where I like Manel Kape. I think he's a very difficult fighter to beat on the feet, a difficult fighter to get reads on and break down. He can be beaten, obviously, but I think it takes a certain level of fighter from a striking expertise to be able to break him down. And as much as I like Zhalgas Zhumagulov as a fighter, I don't think he's going to be able just to get the better of Kape over 3 rounds. I think Kape's got the finishing upside as he hits harder from mixing in with his punches, his kicks. Zhumagulov's got good volume, but he's not really a finishing threat. So Kape's got the finishing upside. And because Kape's going to be so difficult to time, get your reads on and break down, I think Kape's just going to pull away with volume in this fight. If he doesn't fight a finish, just take at least 2 out of the 3 rounds, maybe all 3 comfortably from Zhalgas Zhumagulov, but I'm picking Manel Kape to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Mallory Martin versus Cheyanne Vlismas. Cheyanne Vlismas, many will remember or know her as Cheyanne Bays. Obviously that name changed, no idea what's happened there, but I don't care. I only care what's happening in front of me from a fight perspective. And I think Mallory Martin, I think, is in a very difficult fight here against Vlismas. I think the fight's going to be won and lost on the feet. Martin's going to need this fight down to the mat, but taking Vlismas down is going to be difficult. If she can take her down, keeping her down again is going to be difficult. I don't think Martin has a brutal level of control topside in order to keep someone like Vlismas down for too long. So because of that, I think Vlismas will be able to make her way back up to her feet and create a scenario, create a fight that is going to be won and lost in the striking department. And Vlismas is too solid on the feet when you compare her against Martin. Martin was getting outstruck and beaten by Hannah Cyphers, which again is not a good look. No disrespect to Cyphers, but Vlismas is on a different level with the striking, with her aggression, with her forward pressure, combinations, getting in the face, bullying her opponent inside the cage. And I think bullying's the right word here. I think that's what's going to happen in this fight. I think Vlismas is just going to come forwards hard. And I think Martin's just going to really struggle to find her feet in this fight and get her game plan going, get her game going and start to put it on Vlismas and take her down. I just think it's going to be a difficult fight for Martin to really impose her will. I think Vlismas has got a good fight ahead of her. I'm picking Cheyanne Vlismas to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got a fight that's been booked twice already, so I really hope we get to see it this time because we've got 2 units inside the cage in the light heavyweight division. We've got Alonzo Menifield versus William Knight, 2 guys that are absolutely huge to look at, shredded, powerful, athletic. And I really hope it's not one of those fights that both fighters are so hesitant of the power on either side that we see a bit of a staring match. I really do hope we see some explosive striking, but I do think that Alonzo Menifield will have some upside in this fight from a technical striking perspective and a volume perspective. More importantly, the volume. I think Alonzo Menifield will be the busier fighter, the busier striker, but he's got to be careful he doesn't get hit by William Knight because Knight does have that touch of death, and to be fair, so does Alonzo Menifield. But if this fight is a bit of a staring contest, which there is a chance that that happens, then we're going to see a fight that doesn't have too much action. So I think that the volume upside will be on Alonzo Menifield. But where Alonzo Menifield's actually decent is within the clinch. And it's interesting because if either of these fighters shoots a takedown and tries to get the fight to the mat, I imagine that to be more likely to be William Knight. But I don't think Knight's going to be able to take Alonzo Menifield down. Menifield has got decent takedown defense, and like I said, once that takedown stalls and they're in the clinch, I think Alonzo Menifield will be able to control there as well. From a finishing upside, who knows? Either fighter lands, the other one could be going to sleep. But outside of a knockout, I do think that Alonzo Menifield has the slight more upside across the board. So I think I'm going to pick Alonzo Menifield to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Claudio Puelles versus Gruetzemacher. And again, a fighter that's improved so much over at Sanford MMA with the striking. Claudio Puelles was predominantly a grappler, good submission grappler as well. His wrestling's improved, but his striking, I feel, has improved. And we have only seen glimpses of the developments, albeit, but I've seen enough. And the slight things that I was seeing in Brendan Allen, what I spoke about earlier on, I've seen enough of Puelles in regards to him being more comfortable on the feet, his striking being a little more tight, a little more crisp. He's less rigid, he's less stiff, and like I say, he just looks more relaxed and comfortable on the feet. That's signs that he's improving in his striking to a level that I think he's going to be more than competitive with Chris Gruetzemacher. He might even be the better striker in this fight. Chris Gruetzemacher is game, he's a dog fighter, he's a Homer Simpson type of fighter that'll let you beat him up, and then when you're tired, he'll then come forwards. But Puelles isn't that type of brute force striker. I don't think he's going to do what Rafa Garcia did and come forward, have Gruetzemacher rocked, and then just completely blow his gas tank and Gruetzemacher survive, and then suddenly he's got nothing left. I think that Puelles is going to strike for a little bit, but he loves the single leg takedown. If he doesn't get that single leg takedown, he'll push his opponent back to the cage, where he can then start looking to try and reap a leg or get a hook in, get around the back of his opponent and take the back of them and get a takedown that way. Puelles has got different ways of getting the fight to the mat, but he's a good fighter to trust in regards to getting the fight to the mat. I don't think it's going to be easy against Gruetzemacher. He's tough, he's scrambly, he's difficult to beat. But I do think that Puelles is going to commit to his game plan. He's going to be able to take Gruetzemacher down. And I don't think that Puelles is necessarily going to submit Chris Gruetzemacher. He might be able to, but if he doesn't, I think he's got a level of control on the mat that he's going to be able to see minutes of the rounds, win the rounds, and just prevent Gruetzemacher from really being effective on Fizz back. And at first, I think Gruetzemacher's going to defend takedowns well. I think he's going to be able to get back up to his feet if he is taken down in the early stages. But like I say, I think Puelles commits to the game plan, not quits. I think he commits to the game plan. I think he continually takes Gruetzemacher down, and eventually, if he doesn't get the finish, the judges are just going to see the person that's been in control of the fight, which in my opinion will be Claudio Puelles. So I'm picking Puelles to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got the UFC debutant, the newcomer Azamat Murzakanov versus Jared Vanderaa. There's supposed to have been a fight for Murzakanov against Philippe Lins at light heavyweight, but Lins has pulled out. Vanderaa stepped in, and now it's at heavyweight. And I think it's a bad step in for Jared Vanderaa. Fair play to him for doing it. And also, by the way, fair play to Jared Vanderaa for remaining as competitive as he was against Alexander Romanov. I thought Romanov was going to have a much easier fight than that. But even though Romanov got the finish, an easy fight was not the case. So credit where credit's due to Vanderaa, but I think Murzakanov is going to be a difficult problem for Jared Vanderaa to solve. Murzakanov is a Russian that's good everywhere. He fights in a southpaw stance and has a karate-based stance at times as well, where he's really light on his feet, in and out of range. He's patient, he waits, he makes his reads, but once his reads are in, man, his timing is down to a T. He's got knockout power. He's knocked so many fighters out in round one. But then we saw in the fight, the last fight, that he went 3 rounds, because that's important. A fighter, even though they've got good round one knockout power, they've got to be able to go 3 rounds. And in that last fight that he went 3 rounds, we saw a good takedown game. He was able to take his opponent down, sit in the guard, beat them up. He wasn't interested in jiu-jitsu, trying to pass from position to position, just sitting in the guard, beating them up, and doing enough for the referee not to split them up, and doing enough to win the rounds. And he won, obviously, on the judges' scorecards over 3 rounds. So for me, Jared Vanderaa has got to come into this fight. He's got to have the fight at his own pace, dictate the range, get into boxing range, slide in and out, and I just don't think he's going to get the fight that he wants. Murzakanov's going to be dangerous. He's going to blast him with hard shots. It'll make Vanderaa hesitant. And then Murzakanov's got the second path to victory if he decides to just take Vanderaa down, which Vanderaa can be taken down, he can be controlled. And I just feel that Murzakanov's got 2 paths to victory. He either blasts Vanderaa out the water with his striking, or he takes him down and just sees the rounds out, or finishes on the mat as well. This is obviously heavyweight. Vanderaa could catch Murzakanov and knock him out at any moment. That's a risk you always run if you're betting a fight at £265. But for me, the better fighters, Murzakanov, the newcomer. I'm picking Azamat Murzakanov to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Alex Morono versus Mickey Gall. And the current theme of this podcast seems to be the fighters developing, and Mickey Gall is a developing striker. Predominantly a grappler, good submission game, but he is developing his striking from fight to fight. However, I think he's going to bite off a little bit more than he can chew here with Alex Morono. Alex Morono's the more experienced fighter. I think he's the fighter that's more comfortable in more areas as well. So where Mickey Gall's really good is his grappling, like I've already said, but Morono, low-key, is a legit Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. We just only really see it from a defensive perspective, and that's why not many fighters are able to control him on the mat and submit Alex Morono. He's difficult to take down, he's difficult to control on the mat, so I do feel that this fight is going to be won and lost on the feet. And although Mickey Gall's improving, I think he's slightly more wild than Morono. He's a lot looser. I think he throws with more power too much too often. Morono's more technical, he's tighter with everything, his defense and his striking, I think, is short, sharp, crisp boxing. He'll mix in low kicks as well. So when Gall's coming in aggressively, I don't think that he's going to present anything to Morono that he hasn't seen before. I think Morono will be able to deal with Gall from a counter-striking defensive perspective, but then when it's time for Morono to come forward, I think Morono will do good work there. I can see some moments of wrestling and some topside grappling and defensive grappling as well, but I do think the fight's going to be won and lost on the feet. I'm going with the more experienced veteran, the fighter that I believe is the better striker in a fight that's more likely to be won and lost on the feet. I'm picking Alex Morono to win this fight. And in the final breakdown of the podcast, we've got Luis Smolka versus Vince Morales. And I think it's another bad fight for Vince Morales, if I'm being honest. The thing is with Luis Smolka, he's got a certain ceiling in MMA, and I talk about this a lot. I mentioned it with not so long ago with Marcin Tybura, that Tybora's good at a certain level in the UFC, but the second that he gets that big step up in competition, that's where he falls short. And Smolka's the similar type of fighter. The thing is with Vince Morales, he's not that step up in competition for Smolka. I think it's the exact level that Smolka is going to be inside the UFC. And I think the striking's going to be close. Vince Morales definitely needs to keep this fight vertical to give himself a chance of winning. His striking's decent. I'm not saying he's going to have an edge over Smolka. I think it's very even on the feet. But if Smolka wants to, and I'm sure he's going to, I think he's going to be able to level change, take Vince Morales down. He might not have an easy time of taking him down early on. He might not have an easy time of keeping him down early on. But over 3 rounds, over 15 minutes, I do trust Luis Smolka to be able to get the takedowns that he needs, to be able to get the top side control that he needs. He might find a submission finish, he might find a TKO finish, he might just be able to ride out the minutes in the rounds and steal 2 or 3 rounds out of 3 over the 15 minutes. I think it's a good fight for Luis Smolka. I'm not going to be shocked if Vince Morales wins, but I do expect Smolka to come into this fight, do what he needs to do, get his takedowns, win the fight either by finishing Morales or just seeing the fight out over 3 rounds. So I'm picking Luis Smolka to win this fight. And that's all for this episode of the podcast. I hope you all enjoyed the breakdowns. Don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to the MMA Play 365 YouTube channel. I'm really glad to be back after the 1 week break. I hope you are too. I hope you're excited for the fights. Enjoy the fights, and I'll see you next week.